Okay, so let's talk wedding planning, but on a budget. So this past weekend, I got married. And towards the end of our wedding planning process, my husband and I, we sat down and looked through the expenses that we had. And we realized that we saved so much money. So I want to sit here and talk to you guys about some of the things that we did and decided on that reduced some of the costs of our wedding. So the first tip might be a bit redundant, but you need to set a budget. Going in, at first, I did not have a budget. I was like, I want to get married next to water. I want the prettiest dress. And that's it. Whatever it costs, it costs. But I quickly found out that weddings are expensive. The average US wedding costs about $33,000. When I saw that, I was like, no sir, no ma'am, not me. And a lot of people actually go into debt for their wedding, and I just thought that was so absurd. So I had to really set a budget, and in setting a budget, I had to decide what was priority. So the first tip is to set a budget, and the second is to decide what's priority. For us in our wedding, the photographer was definitely a priority. We wanted a videographer, but we couldn't find anyone that was available around the time, and it wasn't something that was a necessity. It was just an extra want, and it was going to be an extra cost as well. So I'm glad that we decided not to go with a videographer, but we did spend money on a photographer. So that was the most expensive thing. Traditionally, the most expensive thing is the venue, but I'm excited that it was just our photographer who cost the most. And our venue was about half her price. So my third tip is to choose your venue wisely. As I said earlier, I wanted to get married near water. Water was just so important to me. I love water. I love the sound. Everything about it like calms me, and I could not imagine getting married not being around water. So the first venue I found was adorable. It was at a restaurant. The restaurant sat on a lake, and it was a beautiful, beautiful place. So as I said, it had the lake, and the bride would walk down the stairs and stand in front of the lake with the groom and the officiant. It was absolutely adorable, but it was almost $2,000 just for the venue. And I was like, that's not priority. I don't want to spend that much. So we decided to find a different place. And so in searching, I decided to use just venue and not necessarily wedding venue when typing into Google. Whenever you add the word wedding to things, the prices just go up because, as I said, traditionally people spend a lot of money on weddings. So we decided to have our wedding at our local botanical gardens. And it was so beautiful. They did have a garden that had a nice water feature, so I got to have my water and also was able to reduce the cost by almost 3 times. So it was a lot cheaper to get married at our local botanical gardens than it was to get married at the lakefront restaurant. My next tip is to really think about and be intentional with your guest list. So originally we wanted about 50 to 80 people at our wedding, and then when we sat down and thought about it, and of course because of COVID, currently we are in a pandemic, and so that reduced the amount of people allowed in general. So our venue could hold up to 20 people, comfortably, social distance and everything. So we decided to have a guest list of 20 people, and we chose the people that were the closest to us, our immediate family, grandparents, and closest aunts and uncles. So they were all invited to the wedding, and the rest of our family were able to join us through Zoom. So definitely try to use technology. Technology in this case is our friend, and use technology so you can invite family and friends from all over really to come join you for your virtual wedding. The next tip I have is to kind of go easy or do DIY invitations. So for our invitations, we actually splurged a little bit. My husband found them. They were adorable. And he found our invitations. We got them off Etsy. And we spent a good chunk of money on them because they were just so cute, and we just couldn't. And we saved so much money from not choosing our original venue that we felt like it was okay, it's doable, it's within our budget, we can go for these invitations. But beforehand, I feel like I'm a creative person. I'd created our invitations on Canva, and they were gonna be a lot cheaper than what we ordered them from through Etsy. So that is another way to save some money for your entire wedding, is to do DIY invitations. The next tip to reduce some costs would be to skip the bridal party. This can be a little tricky. If having a bridal party is important to you and you want to prioritize that, by all means do it. For us, it wasn't necessarily important. I had a few people in my life that were also getting married around the same time, and they had decided to have about three bridesmaids, 3 grooms in their wedding, as opposed to like 7 or 8. And then we decided to have 0. So it was just us. We didn't have a huge bridal party, and that reduces costs as well. This can be a little tricky because traditionally, in other countries, the bride would pay for the bridesmaid and the groomsmen outfits and makeup and everything that they need. It'd be paid for by the bride. But usually in the US, the bridesmaid and groomsmen pay for their own things. And that just didn't really set well with me, to have them pay for things if we were going to include them. And I know in our budget, we didn't have enough to do that for them. So we decided to not have bridesmaid and groomsmen in our wedding. Another tip is to think of like a non-traditional reception. So normally after the wedding, you go to a different location or the same location and have a reception. You have tons of food, there's a lot of dancing and hanging out and giggling. We decided not to do that. We did not have a reception in mind. His parents did decide to have us a small reception afterwards, but that did not invade our budget at all. What we decided to do personally was, the family that was left over on wedding night that stayed in town, we all went to Topgolf and just played golf and hung out that night. So that was a lot, very non-traditional. No one really does that, but it worked out for us and we had a blast. So maybe doing a non-traditional reception would help to save some costs, and it really cut down on the food. At the venue that we wanted, that was about $2,000 just for the venue. Since it was a restaurant, we were required to have the reception and the food catered through them, and that was going to be about $30 per plate for upwards of 80 guests. So it was going to get expensive really fast. So that's all the tips that I have for you guys on planning a wedding with a budget. I hope these tips were helpful for you, and I wish you well on the rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.